Andy Mitten is with us this morning. Good morning to you, Andy. How are you?
Good morning. Okay, good to join you.
We've been talking a little bit about just the general quality of football across the Premier League and how a bit of the zip, with the exception obviously of Manchester City, has gone out of it for most teams. Even Leicester last night, as Phil pointed out earlier on, they've got the best away record in the Premier League and they just couldn't bring anything in that second half against Burnley. Are Manchester United part of what's happening generally? Is there the general malaise or is there a malaise that's more specific to Manchester United at the moment?
I asked Ole Gunnar the day before the game quite an open question about whether any players had surprised him this season. And he replied that as a collective, the whole squad had impressed him in so much as the difficult times, they don't have a social life, they can't go to the cinema, to a concert, for a meal. And he used the word relentless. Now, when I put that out, you got a predictable response of, if I earn millions of pounds a week, blah, blah, blah. But it is relentless. So this time last year, Manchester United had just come back from a break in Marbella. And I know that that really worked for them. I saw it with my own eyes. The first game back after that break, I saw Ed Woodward go up to Ole Gunnar in the tunnel at Stamford Bridge and say, Marbella again next season. And Ole was enthusiastic. Yeah, because it had worked. Bruno had settled in. The players had bonded well. And there's none of that now. So United are suffering, but all teams are suffering. United are still second. You wonder how, given the poor recent form and the number of points being dropped, but the team are still second. But the performances have been poor in the last 6 weeks. I think it's 3 wins from the last 10 league matches. I think 4 of the last 5 away games have been 0-0 draws. And the low points keep getting lower. West Brom a few weeks ago was really bad. I mean, West Brom, who cannot get a win, drew against Manchester United. And then the 0-0 at Crystal Palace. It was just dreadful. Just a terrible performance. So you're quite rightly asking why. Fatigue, yeah. I don't know whether that is responsible for 10% of that poor performance or 40% of that performance. I need to ask some questions about that. And it's frustrating for fans because go back 6 weeks, the team were top of the league and just beating Liverpool, and things were looking good, but we're still on this yo-yo cycle of boom and bust. And that frustrates fans. But then you look at Manchester City and that makes them probably even more depressed because City are just winning everything and will probably canter off into the distance, not just this season. But then you look at Liverpool, and Liverpool have been even worse than the teams around them, including Manchester United. As we speak, the team is second, still in the FA Cup, still in the Europa League, not the Champions League, I might add. But everything feels a little bit flat. And you wonder how United are going to get out of this poor form. Maybe the team's missing players who've been absent. I think Cavani, he came back, but he looked rusty. Paul Pogba was doing very well before he got injured. And you just look at that performance against Palace and think, who could have changed that game? And Pogba would certainly be one of those players, a fit Pogba. But he wasn't there and he couldn't. And United took 1 point from 6 against Palace this season. And that's just not good enough for a team who's got aspirations of competing for the title. Not this year, but certainly next year. It's just not good enough. He's way, way short of the levels which are required.
There's been a lot mentioned about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and potentially a little bit of a philosophy shift, especially when it comes to the games against the rest of the Big Six. That statistic has been thrown around quite a lot over the last few days, especially in the draw against Chelsea. Are you seeing that manifest itself in the games against the rest of the league as well, Andy, where they are being a little bit more cautious?
If you look at the results against the lower teams recently, 1-1 against West Brom, 0-0 against Palace, the home defeat against Sheffield United, that seemed like more of a freak result, to be honest, compared to the other ones. But the bottom line is, if the football is dull, then the manager loses the fans. That happened with Van Gaal, it happened with Mourinho. And fans want to be entertained. It's Manchester United. It's not unreasonable to expect the team not to go to West Brom or Palace and get a win. Now, there are mitigating factors like we've talked about. The team is still second in the league, but it's gone flat. You cannot pretend otherwise. And I feel that Ollie needs a trophy this season. That will help him hugely. But if the season just disintegrates into nothingness, and if United are not careful, they'll fall out of that top four. And that'd be a major, major problem. Fortunately for United, the rest are worse than United at the moment. So you mentioned Leicester, West Ham's performance dips, Liverpool still haven't got back on track. That Chelsea 0-0 draw, that result was actually better for United than it was for Chelsea. It's Chelsea who need to make the ground up because they've been so bad they got rid of their manager. So that 0-0 wasn't a bad result for Manchester United. And it was a marginally better game than the very poor game at Old Trafford earlier on this season. But too many of those poor games and the fans will start to lose faith. There's a really good spell after that terrible start to the season when United surged up the league table. Top scorers in the league, still the second top scorers in the league. But the forwards are not scoring. The top scorer is attacking midfielder Bruno Fernandes. Even Bruno, the best player by far in the last year, has gone off the boil. So it all leads back into that point about fatigue. They're not doing it on purpose, are they? They're not going to Palace to play badly on purpose. I was at Palace last July after the team had been refreshed after the lockdown, and it was a very different performance to the one in the fog on Wednesday night. Partly because it was in July and it was a sunny summer's evening. But you get the point. The team are in a pretty poor position at the moment, and they've got to get out of it because they're running out of games. Now, if the season ended now, second, people would accept that. But the performances, as much as the results have been disappointing lately.
One of the subplots of the last couple of days, Andy, has been Ole Gunnar Solskjaer post the Chelsea game, getting pretty wound up about the refereeing and about the conspiracies that have been thrown out there about Manchester United. Do you think that there is airs of Alex Ferguson here when Solskjaer talks about refs?
I don't mind him getting angry and challenging decisions. I think he's within his right to challenge that penalty which wasn't given for the handball at Stamford Bridge at the weekend, or when Chelsea's players come in behind the referee as he judges a VAR decision. And sometimes, at least publicly, because certainly not in private, at least publicly, he's too nice and too well balanced. And Fergie, who is obviously his great mentor, wasn't like that. I think there's two things here. Yeah, more of it is not a bad thing. I don't think you'll find fans complaining about that if he's fighting for the club's cause. But secondly, football has changed. You know, Ollie couldn't do things that Fergie did. He couldn't treat the media. You can't just ban the media because they write something that you don't like Sir Alex Ferguson would do. And Ferguson was this winning machine and one of the greatest managers in history. But football has changed very subtly, even in the 8 years since he retired. Players have changed. What you can get away with players, Fergie was famous for his hairdryer. You're not going to get away with that as much now, I don't think, because society has changed. There'd be accusations that you can't talk to me like that. This is bullying. So Ollie's not stupid. He knows. I mean, he's got a good handle on the fact that the players are going through a pandemic, and footballers will be the last group of people who the general public have sympathy for. But I spoke to a couple of them last week. Bruno Fernandes just moved to England with his family, and within a month, he's in lockdown, living in a new country. And it's not just Bruno, it's his family. It's his daughter. You're living in a new country, and your schooling's being compromised, and it's not easy. And I'm sorry, but having a big paycheck just doesn't solve all that. And I remember speaking to the wife of one player 10 years ago, and she described it as being a golden prison. She was away from her family. She didn't really have any friends. And if you're in the time of the pandemic, it doesn't make things any better, it just makes things worse. Their family can't come and visit them because they're not allowed into the UK now, unless they do, that hotel quarantine, which is very difficult, or the 10-day quarantine, which is very difficult. Not that there's flights, the flight schedules have been cut right down. So there's lots of negative external factors. And it's the same for any Premier League club. So maybe they're all becoming as bad as each other, but sometimes a team does have to win a football match. But your first point is correct. There's so many bad performances. And it just feels like, I'm normally at games, but I'm watching a lot more on television this season, and every single night, it's not just the Premier League. The Premier League is pushing, we are the Premier League, we're the biggest league in the world, but so is La Liga, so is Serie A, so is the Bundesliga. And I'm from a generation where if one game of football was on once a week, that was a big event and you tune in for it. And now, I'm seeing like 7 per night. So there's so much football.
Yeah.
Maybe fatigue sets in with the fans as well.
I think it definitely does. Can I? There's one comparison that I want to make. The Liverpool fans are rightly pointing to the loss of one of the best defenders in the world as the catastrophic reason for their season falling apart. That does give all of the rest of the team a bit of a free pass, right? That's kind of the argument that we've been having with Liverpool fans, and their knock-on is like, oh, all of their centre-backs are gone, and so all of their midfielders end up playing there, and then the midfield is robbed of its protective structure and its ability to run games, and therefore the whole team suffers. They've scored loads of goals, mind you, and they still have a striker who's playing unbelievably well. I was thinking about Manchester United's situation. Is there something in the fact that Man United don't fully trust their central defensive partnership just yet, and that they're constantly, in those big games in particular, picking 2 defensive midfielders, and that we haven't yet seen them come up with a defined Ole Gunnar Solskjaer attacking style, where at the moment it seems they're quite happy to give the opposition 70% possession and go straight and try and be Rapier-like, and it's a thrust, and it's definitely a way of playing, but it's not going to control games over the course of a season. It might win you a Champions League in a smash and grab season, and if everything goes your way, but it's going to be very difficult to see how you'll win a Premier League title that way. Does it actually come back to not trusting the central defensive partnership? Because that's why you pick your defensive central midfielders the whole time, and that's why you don't give them the license to add extra bodies to attack, and that means that everything has to go through Bruno, and the opposition know this, and that's why the best teams are able to defend against him. It's not that he's playing badly in those games, it's that he's got no support.
There's been an over-reliance on Bruno. United do not have a central defender who's as good as Virgil van Dijk. I'm not watching Liverpool every week, but I know people who I trust, and they were long describing his signing as transformative. They also spoke very highly of Alisson. I know he's had a bad time of things recently, professionally and personally, but I was at the 2019 Champions League final, and I wrote about the best player on the pitch, and it was Liverpool's goalkeeper. Now, clearly Liverpool have been good enough to win the league, the European Cup, and win the world title. With Manchester United, there is a reason why the club are continuing to look for a new central defender, and it comes back to your point. This isn't Vidic and Ferdinand that we're watching at United in Maguire and Lindelof. You've got Phil Jones who's injured far too much to be of any use to the team. Clearly he doesn't want to be injured, but that's how it is. Eric Bailly is also injury prone. On his day, he's a fantastic player. Is he Vidic class? No, because he's not playing enough. You've got to be playing all the time. Harry Maguire, 7 out of 10, man, but it's not good enough if you're going to play for Manchester United. He's the captain of the team. He frustrates fans with his mistakes. And then you've got Victor Lindelof, who's probably receives even more criticism than Harry Maguire. So collectively, it's not been good enough. There's been mistakes this season. You've got to be great. If you're going to be playing for a top Man United team winning trophies, you've got to have a great central defensive partnership. Bruce and Pallister were outstanding defenders and were trusted. So use the word trust, and you're right to use that. I think Ollie's making the best of what he's got, but they're looking at central defenders for a reason. They will bring somebody in if the team, the club have their way. They've been looking at several different players, watching them very closely. And then to your point of the 2 defensive midfielders in front of them, that's also frustrating fans now at the moment, because it's seen as, yeah, it gives the team a platform to attack, but playing it against Palace, come on. Manchester United should be better than this. And individually, the form of a lot of players has got worse. You know, Fred is not having a great time of things. McTominay's had injuries. Matic was the best player in the team at this time last year, just before lockdown, was one of the 2 or 3 best players, and he's not got to those levels. So I think individually and collectively, there are issues there, and the result is the results that you're now seeing from Manchester United. But it is also baffling that this same group of players looked so good and so convincing around that Christmas period and went top of the league. And it looked like there was a title race for a month or 6 weeks, and then City just came to Old Trafford in the League Cup with a better team. And you could maybe say after that one, small margins, but the margins look vast at the moment between City and United. And it's the derby this weekend away at Manchester City.
Andy, I wonder, does it give you a little bit of hope that this is the way this season has gone? So maybe last season, Liverpool could afford to keep a fairly rigid first 11. I know that they had a deep squad in general terms, but they didn't need the level of depth that Manchester City have this season, whereas City have had an injury to their best player, Kevin De Bruyne, and they can get by so easily without that. Next season, there shouldn't be that level of injury. There shouldn't be that level of fatigue, and squad depth probably won't be as necessary. That might close the gap towards Manchester City a little bit if we're clutching at straws here.
I think you're clutching at straws. I'm not feeling particularly hopeful at the moment. I think PSG and Manchester City, given the way they are funded, will just pull away from everybody, including Barcelona, including Madrid. They just do not have the financial issues that every other club have. Manchester United is a commercial juggernaut, albeit one owned by an American family who've got the club in debt from a takeover which should never have been allowed to happen. But even United, and the results will come out later today, have been hit badly by COVID. The club are losing £4 million per home game without fans. And that impacts. I think United actually have been quite lucky with injuries so far this season, quite lucky with the number of players who've caught COVID, because it has been so few. There's been much worse times in terms of injuries. And I did a piece the other day, 5 years on from Marcus Rashford's debut, and I looked at the injuries. There were 13 players out. There's not been that level of injuries. I just think City have got an exceptional manager. They've recruited smarter than United. Yeah, there will be criticism of their ownership, and that will never go away. And I think a lot of Puritan football fans will always have no time for that model, be it at RB Leipzig or at Chelsea or at PSG. But Guardiola is a genius. City have recruited far better than United. Ruben Dias could have come to Manchester United, but because City had developed very strong links with Benfica, and they even had senior members of Benfica's coaching staff who'd worked in Manchester at City, because I've spoken to them. They got the player who's looking like he's replaced Van Dijk as the best defender in the league this season. I'm sure Van Dijk will come back and be very, very good, but the time at the moment is for that City team. And if you're asking me if I'm optimistic about Manchester derby, not at all. But there's a big but. I'm an idiot. It's an addiction. And on Sunday, I'm going to absolutely watch it. And when that game starts, I will be convinced that Manchester United are capable of victory. And bizarre that it is, United have won the last 2 games there at City. And in the league last year, Ollie told me that was his best moment as a United fan. Just a shame there hasn't been more of them.
That's the joy of being a proper sports fan. One last thing that I just wanted to bring up before we go. We've been talking about the strikers, and just like it's clear how Cavani is a focal point in the team. And if Cavani was 26 or 28 or even 30, Manchester United fans would be like, yes, this is great. But because he's the age he is, we started to look back, and David Myler was making the point, when was the last time that there was a Golden Boot winner at Manchester United? And we looked it up. It was Van Persie. It was all the way back to Van Persie. Obviously, there have been strikers who scored goals, and Zlatan scored goals, Lukaku scored goals. But if you look at that list of strikers, they've been searching Memphis, Lukaku, Martial, Falcao, Zlatan, Igalo, Cavani, they haven't bought well when it comes to the strikers either.
No, and I think, to be fair to Zlatan, he was successful at United. He scored a lot of goals. I think Cavani's a very good player. He needs to start scoring more goals. He's had his suspension, he's had his injury. He arrived when the season was already underway, and he took a bit of time to get to the levels of fitness. He wasn't ready until end of October, if I remember rightly. And the forwards are not scoring enough goals. That's the premise of your point. United are the second top scorers in the league. They were the top scorers until a week or two ago. But the top scorer is a midfielder, Bruno Fernandes. And there is not a prolific centre forward at Manchester United, and there needs to be. Marcus Rashford, not prolific. Anthony Martial's having a shocker of a season. Mason Greenwood scored 1 Premier League goal this season. It's not good enough. It's as simple as that. If you're playing for Manchester United in a forward position, you've got to be scoring more than that. At the best, that attack is young, exciting, fast, beautiful to watch on the counter. But at the end of this season, you'll have to look at the bigger picture, and Ollie will have to decide where is the priority to strengthen his team. And I think that he absolutely wanted Erling Haaland, but he didn't come to Old Trafford. And I can understand the reasons why he didn't come, because United don't want to give ownership over to an agent. But we're missing, the team is missing a lethal striker, a Van Persie, a Ruud van Nistelrooy. They do play more as a collective, and there were times when the team were too over-reliant on Ruud van Nistelrooy. But if there's a quality number 9 there, there's a quality number 9. Look at how good Atletico have been with Luis Suarez this season. Written off at Barcelona, playing for a team who are top of the league, because he's a brilliant number 9. Still, he's not the player that he was, but he's still a brilliant number 9.
I wonder if maybe if they even inquired about Luis Suarez, about what level of madness there would have been if Suarez had signed for Manchester United.
I can think of many players, probably every footballer in the world, who most United fans would rather have at Old Trafford. Then again, Alan Smith came from Leeds United, and it probably wind Liverpool fans up if Luis Suarez had come to Old Trafford to be a success. And football fans are utter hypocrites as well. They change the tune so quickly. I remember Wayne Rooney, who was a great striker, 2013, he wanted to leave. And I remember getting a call on the 6th of August that year from a radio station in the UK, asking for United fans who would stick up for Rooney. I couldn't find one, not one. It was get him out. And 2 weeks later, when he stayed because United wouldn't sell him, half the fans were singing his name at Swansea away in the first game of the season. And a month later, all the fans were singing his name. So there's ways back for everybody. But I think Suarez at Old Trafford, no, it's not something we're ever going to see. Then again, the club do like aging strikers.
So maybe, just one season too late. Andy, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Thank you.
Enjoy the game at the weekend.